Chapter 51. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rumble, the sky exploded with thunder and the wind howled. A storm was brewing, dark clouds blanketed everything, snuffing out the sunlight, waves crashed against the shore, and in the distance, monstrous waves, easily 30 feet high, barreled toward the beach. Run! Tsunami! What the hell? It's gone dark. Monster! Everyone, get to higher ground. Tourists screamed and scrambled to escape the beach. The lifeguard grabbed his loudspeaker, fear lacing his voice. He'd never seen anything like it in all his years. Those skyscraper-sized waves could drag everyone into the ocean, and that weird black fog. It felt like stepping into another dimension. A woman in a black robe hovered above the chaos. Her dark clothes billowed in the wind as she gazed down at the terrified people. Who is that? Wanda clutched a red rose, her eyes burning with anger. She'd finally worked up the nerve to confess her feelings, and now this. Where did this witch come from, ruining everything? Scarlet energy flickered in her eyes, her hands instinctively shaping chaos magic. She wanted to wipe that smug look off the old woman's face. Besides, the witch's presence was stirring up her own powers. This had to be her fault. She bit her lip, fear nowhere to be seen. Nobody messed with her date with Hood, especially not now. Agatha. Hood recognized her instantly. The woman in black was Agatha Harkness. An ancient witch, dating back to the Middle Ages. She was practically the Ancient One's contemporary, not quite as powerful, maybe, but still a serious threat. What's she doing here? Hood knew Agatha hadn't just dropped by for a scenic view. She was after them, no doubt. He'd suspected she was dabbling in the Darkhold. Her progress must be slow, because she clearly had her eyes on Wanda's chaos magic. Agatha. Wanda spat the name out like a curse, her voice icy. What a stupid name. That she didn't know who the woman was, but she was definitely crashing their party. And that wasn't going to fly. Scarlet energy blazed around Wanda as she shot into the sky, eyes locked on Agatha. She wanted to grind her face into the sand. Look! It's the Avengers. Scarlet Witch is here. We're saved. Thank God, I thought we were goners. Go get her, Scarlet Witch. The fleeing tourists recognized Wanda. Her reputation had been on the upswing lately, and her presence gave everyone a surge of hope. Panic subsided, replaced by a sense of relief. After all, this was the Scarlet Witch. She'd taken down those giant bull monsters last time. Hood frowned, ready to jump into the fray, but Wanda glanced back, stopping him with a look. Stay out of this. I got it, Star. She sent the thought to him telepathically. She needed to deal with this herself, vent her rage. Okay, Star. Hood sensed her anger and backed down awkwardly. He didn't know what set her off, but Wanda was definitely seeing red. Best to let her handle it, and just be ready to protect her. Wanda Maximoff. Agatha grinned, her face twisting into something grotesque. A chilling laugh ripped through the air. She stared at Wanda, desire burning in her eyes. Bitch, you can call me by my name too. Wanda snarled, chaos magic crackling around her. This woman couldn't have picked a worse time to show up. He. Agatha's grin widened, almost splitting her face. It is you. The chaos magic doesn't lie. She'd sensed the power and followed it here, like a beacon calling her. Ha! Wanda scoffed, done with the talking. She thrust out her hands, scarlet energy erupting outwards. It snaked across the air, wrapping around Agatha's wrists like burning chains. The energy tightened, threatening to rip her hands clean off. Is this the allure, the power of chaos magic? Agatha was almost giddy. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She reveled in the feel of the energy binding her, her voice dripping with pleasure. Seriously, what a freak. Wanda cranked up the intensity of the scarlet energy. At this power level, she could crush a car into a pancake, but Agatha didn't flinch, just groaned softly. Buzz. Star, the scarlet energy vanished. Wanda was stunned. Nobody had ever broken free so easily, and Agatha barely seemed to have tried. There was something really strange about her aura. You're weak. Like you've never even used magic before. You don't deserve this power. It's wasted on you. Agatha's face twisted with fury, her eyes burning holes in Wanda. This power should be hers. She was the one who deserved it, but fate had given it to some clueless girl who didn't even know how to wield it. Her anger intensified. Let me show you what real magic looks like. Her palm glowed with an evil purple light, laced with black smoke. The ball of energy shot forward, a blur of dark power. It slammed into Wanda. Boom. Bang, black tendrils exploded outwards. Wanda threw up a scarlet shield, deflecting the worst of it, then retaliated with a blast of pure energy. Bang, the scarlet light hit Agatha, sending her tumbling backwards. Scarlet Witch nailed her. She's so powerful. I thought that old hag was supposed to be strong. Scarlet Witch's got this. Die, you witch. The crowd went wild. From what they'd seen, Wanda was winning. What just happened? Wanda stared at her hands, confused and unnerved. She didn't feel like she'd won at all. Agatha, still airborne, looked completely unharmed. She just grinned at Wanda. She held out her palm, showing that the scarlet light was absorbed by her. I told you, it's wasted on you. Whoosh, a vortex opened in Agatha's hand. It was like a grinder, consuming the scarlet energy. In seconds, it vanished completely. This. Impossible. Wanda was shocked. She'd never seen anything like it. The old witch was absorbing her scarlet energy. She had to be careful using chaos magic herself. Without training, absorbing it could have serious consequences. But Agatha was laughing, completely unfazed. Wanda, watch out. That witch can absorb energy. No. She can devour it. Hood's voice snapped into her mind. Devour. Wanda was confused. She'd never heard of such a thing. It defied everything she knew about energy. She's been known to do this. She's devoured other people's magic energy. Hood knew all about Agatha's history. She'd even absorbed her own coven once, just to become stronger. She'd do anything for power. She was after Wanda's chaos magic. Is that your boyfriend down there? Agatha sensed the connection between Wanda and Hood, her voice raspy. She had her sights set on Hood, too. Mind your own business. Wanda gathered her energy, attacking the old witch. The scarlet energy intensified, distorting the air. Agatha became engulfed in red light. Scarlet Witch, your parlor tricks are useless against me. Agatha smiled. To her, this was a gift. The scarlet light that permeated the surroundings was like being pulled by a black hole. The energy was devoured in a flash. She then grinned as she looked back at Wanda from not too far away. It's useless. Give me the chaos magic and I might just spare your life as well as your little lovers. She then cast her gaze onto Hood, her eyes filled with greed. She could faintly sense the power of the phoenix emanating from Hood. If she could take both powers, she would be unstoppable. She unconsciously began to salivate, trembling with excitement at this prospect. She had stumbled into something great. Take your eyes off Hood. Wanda was furious with Agatha's intentions. The witch was not only trying to threaten her using Hood but was also eyeing him in a lewd manner. Her hands began to rumble with red light. The explosion of energy caused the clouds to be stained red with crimson light. The ground began to radiate a soft red glow, inside the Stark Tower. This is more fiscal expenditure than anticipated. Hodder said as he rubbed his temples and threw the documents on the table. Ever since he started leading the Avengers, there have been more projects that have required compensation. When people's houses are destroyed, they would require some compensation, especially houses that were paid for with decades of effort. He cannot pretend to not notice it. He has to take responsibility for the Avengers' affairs and handle all the documents. Boss, there has been a vicious supernatural attack on Gwilyn Beach. Friday reported. A vicious attack. What exactly happened? Hod then frowned. From what we can see, Wanda is under attack and is currently fighting the enemy. Friday replied. What? Tony then jolted up from his chair, as he did not expect Wanda to be attacked so suddenly. Friday, call Steve and send the rest of the team to Gwilyn Beach to back Wanda up. I am on my way there. Back at the beach. Call. Wanda was panting heavily as her chest heaved up and down. The long battle has made her tired. no matter what she did, she could not inflict any damage onto Agatha. At the same time, Agatha was looking down at Wanda calmly. "Little witch, you don't look so good," she taunted. Just from looking at each other, one could tell that they were at different levels. "You." Wanda knew that Agatha was absorbing her power. She attempted to put more power into the battle, but it still did not work. "Wanda, have you forgotten about magic?" Hood spoke. "Magic?" Wanda then remembered the magic she learned today. She did not use it previously as she had just learned it. She also did not know if it would work on Agatha. Wanda then took a deep breath and placed her hands together. The red light then became darker, as if it was being infused by something. Bang! Wanda removed her hands and launched the energy ball at Agatha. "I've said it before, it won't work on me." Agatha attempted to absorb the energy ball, before her eyes suddenly widened. No, she was knocked out directly. Ahem, she only stopped after flying quite a distance, as her face turned pale. How could this be? Shouldn't I be able to absorb it? Did you use a spell on it? Agatha realized that Wanda had used an offensive spell, causing it to backfire and hurt herself. Did he teach you? Agatha looked at Hood, and then at Wanda. Her eyes were filled with murder. Chapter 52. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, it's you. Agatha whirled around, fixing her gaze on Hood. Scarlet Witch's sudden shift in behavior was a direct result of their earlier mental link. Which meant Hood had to be the one manipulating Wanda. I really underestimated the wielder of the Phoenix Force. She thought. Don't you dare look at Hood. Wanda, sensing Agatha's stare, bristled like an angry kitten. She clapped her hands, and the sea churned violently, countless scarlet lights swirling beneath the surface. With a surge of power, the crimson energy roared towards Agatha in massive waves. Damn it! Agatha, confronted by the approaching scarlet tide, finally lost her playful demeanor. Her eyes hardening, she raised her hands abruptly, pulling them down. The dark clouds above swirled like a rapid river. In the blink of an eye, they formed a massive black wall before her. The next instant, the giant wave crashed against the dark barrier. The collision unleashed a deafening roar, like some monstrous beast bellowing from the abyss. The air vibrated, the tsunami-like force of the impact constantly hammered at the black wall. Each impact chipped away at the mass of dark clouds. Finally, on the third strike, the black wall shattered. The scarlet wave, laced with hurricane-force winds, slammed into Agatha. Die! Die! Agatha screamed, her face contorted in pain and rage, her shrill voice echoing across the sky. Because chaos magic attacks the mind, it can break a person's will. The waves and winds scattered the heavy black clouds, sweeping across the landscape. Even beach chairs and umbrellas were sucked into the churning water. Oh my God, is this the power of the Avengers? This is worse than a missile. This isn't even a power from this world. Even with that kind of strength, it's insane that the old witch is still alive. The distant onlookers gasped, witnessing the apocalyptic scene. Was this still a battle between humans? They never imagined anything this devastating. Meanwhile, aboard the plane, Steve and the others watched the reporter's live feed, rushing to the scene. Have we identified this woman yet? Steve frowned, turning to Natasha, who was furiously typing on her computer. Not yet. At least, there's no record of her in the official archives. Natasha replied grimly. She'd already run a facial recognition search across every database and newspaper, but nothing turned up. This woman in the black robe seemed to have materialized out of thin air. Forget that, the situation on the ground is going from bad to worse. Falcon Sam watched the unfolding scene with a worried expression. Back at the beach, bang, Agatha, fighting against the onslaught of chaos magic, stretched her hands wide. With a roar, a wave of intensely dark energy erupted from her body. The black energy, tinged with purple, engulfed her. In a heartbeat, this black energy shot out in all directions, slamming against the waves and dispersing them, sending water cascading everywhere. The energy of the impact crashed violently against the rocky coastline. Even the rock face was shattered by the force. The black energy didn't stop there. It slammed into Wanda, sending her flying backward. Ahem! Wanda was sent tumbling, crashing over 10 meters away. She used her scarlet energy to stabilize herself mid-air. but the energy had already taken its toll. Her skin was flushed, but despite the pain, Wanda looked at Agatha with renewed anger. "Scarlet Witch, I gave you a chance. Since you refuse to cooperate, then you can die." Agatha's face was dark, the crazy smile gone. She had expected this to be easy, but she no longer planned to hold back. She had originally wanted to simply get away, leaving Wanda and Hood with a worthless life. She didn't want the Avengers on her back like a persistent rash, but there was no turning back now. She resolved to not only steal the power of the Phoenix and chaos magic, but to destroy the souls of these two people. Ha! Agatha's wrinkled face twisted, and the black energy around her seemed drawn by an invisible force. It poured into her palms, writhing like trapped souls. An immense power coalesced between her hands. Even the dark clouds reacted. They split into countless gray tendrils and merged with the gathering gray-black energy. The sea was drawn into the pool, with wave crests rising. It seemed like it wanted to be sucked into the sphere of darkness. Agatha's eyes widened, and the black ball turned into a black ray that blasted towards Wanda. Crap! Wanda recognized the power contained in the beam. She waved her hand repeatedly, and countless scarlet lights rapidly formed shield after shield in front of her. But before she could complete her defenses, the beam hit the shields. The crimson energy began to dissolve on impact. The energy crashed on the ground and exploded, leaving countless holes in the ground. "This bitch! He's draining my power." Wanda could feel it. The energy beam was acting as a bridge between her and Agatha. It was draining her strength. Her face grew more worried by the second. She was starting to panic. If it continued, she would die. Although she wanted to change her current situation, she had no way. In a specific space, only the wizard who wrote the runes can use magic. Hood's voice echoed in her mind. A specific space. Wanda realized what it meant. If that's the case, then she can get out of this. Suddenly, more scarlet light burst from Wanda's body, swirling around her. Slowly, a surge of crimson energy crashed against the black ray. Although the power was already substantial, it was being consumed by Agatha, on the plane. "Step on it." "Wanda's in a bad way." Though Steve didn't understand magic, he could see the black rays were draining Wanda's energy. Coming here was a mistake. The best thing is to stop the energy output. Natasha knew that since the other party wanted to absorb the power, the way to stop them was to shut the connection between them. Using even more force would simply be playing into her hands. This is bad. Wanda's defenseless. Falcon Sam was worried, since Wanda's powers were from the Scarlet Light, against an enemy that could absorb the Scarlet Light. It was an unfair fight. They were rushing as fast as they could. "Giving up already, little witch?" Agatha watched Wanda unleash chaos magic. The more chaos magic Wanda threw out, the faster she could absorb it. She was ecstatic, feeling the power surge within her. As long as she had more energy, she could become stronger. She had worried it would take too long, but Wanda was making things so easy. This was perfect. But as the crimson light poured in, Agatha noticed something off. Buzz, star. What's happening? Agatha could feel that the black rays were becoming unresponsive. Even her hands felt numb, like they were turning to stone. She had no idea what was going on. The next second, the black rays vanished. The dispersed black energy returned to the dark clouds. "What did you do?" "You damn little witch." She was shocked. For a magician, losing power was like dying. She couldn't sense any magic. She was terrified. Several enormous scarlet runes emerged in the dark sky above. The designs looked like ancient words only a few could recognize. These scarlet runes floated, surrounding the witches. "You set up a barrier here." Agatha understood. She had never imagined that Wanda would be so talented in magic. It had taken her a long time to learn how to create a barrier, but it seemed that Wanda had figured it out herself. The barrier was the reason her magic had gone haywire. "In a specific space, only the wizard who wrote the rune can use magic." Wanda spoke, looking at Agatha with disdain, but she couldn't help but glance at Hood. Without Hood, she would never have been able to find a way out. It was also because of Hood's guidance, or she would not have been able to use the barrier. "Wanda is fast on the uptake." Hood watched the scene calmly. The others failed to notice that despite all the mayhem, Hood wasn't affected at all. "Damn witch, how could she do this?" Agatha screamed. She should have finished Wanda at the start. Wanda had too much potential. if she waited, something bad would happen. As Agatha was hesitating, Wanda moved. Wanda stretched her hand out, pulling back. Scarlet lights poured out of Agatha. It was the magic that Agatha had absorbed. It went back to Wanda's body. No, as the chaos magic drained out of her, Agatha wailed. She was losing her life. She began to see her long-grown energy vanish. No. Agatha's face trembled. You forced me to do this. If she didn't fight, she would lose everything. If she took the power of the Phoenix and chaos magic, it would be worth it, she chanted. The black gas turned into ink. This ink seemed to devour light. The black needles pierced the sky. Power surged. With dark clouds forming a vortex, something was brewing. What is that? Is the world going to end? I can't breathe. Can a human have that much power? This feeling gave everyone the sense of doom. It's forbidden magic. Hood was solemn. Agatha was trying to break Wanda's barrier to use forbidden magic. If she wanted to run, she could. Agatha wanted Wanda's chaos magic no matter what, but Wanda was too young. If it had been 10 years later, it would have been the Wanda in the original story. Agatha wouldn't have broken Wanda's barrier. A black pillar burst towards Wanda. That energy. Wanda panicked and tried to block it. Agatha seized the chance, forming a sword and stabbing Wanda, who couldn't dodge. Everyone grew pale. They braced themselves for Wanda to be stabbed. Steve felt his heart drop. At that distance, there was no dodging. Die. Agatha cackled. Just then, a figure appeared in front of Wanda. The man touched the tip of the sword. It vanished. Whoosh. Star. Puff. Star. The black sword turned into mist. Chapter 53. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hold up. Hod dismissed the black giant sword with a flick of his finger. His right hand remained in his pocket, leaning back slightly. The black t-shirt clung to his frame. He didn't move much, but floating there, he radiated power. Hod. Seeing Hod in front of her, Wanda instantly relaxed. A moment before, she'd been in real danger. Now, with Hod there, she felt safe, like nothing could hurt her as long as he was around. You. Agatha looked at Hod, involuntarily backing away a few feet in the air. Her pupils darted, sensing his raw power. The phoenix force radiating from Hod had disintegrated the black giant sword. This guy, he was terrifyingly strong, and the phoenix force within him was incredibly pure, even more potent than her chaos magic with Wanda. I didn't expect you to possess such compelling phoenix force. My mistake. Agatha snapped out of it, and fear gave way to fervor. Like a fanatic, she stared at Hod, desire overriding fear. All that mattered was acquiring his power. Facing Hod, only one thought consumed her: absorb him. If she absorbed him, she would become the most powerful black magician in the world, maybe even the universe. She licked her dry lips, eyes locked onto Hod like a wolf on raw meat. Who was that? I didn't even see him, and suddenly he's in the sky. Thank goodness. I thought Scarlet Witch was done for. Lucky that guy showed up. Is he a superhero? Must be one of the new Avengers. He's strong, that's for sure. He broke that giant sword like it was nothing. Everyone below stood speechless. Even through the swirling black fog, they could make out shapes in the sky. They couldn't see his face, but the man's aura was enough to give them hope. Reinforcements had arrived. Even if he was only as strong as Wanda, he could still take down that hag, but they couldn't identify the superhero by his clothes. The Avengers were distinctive. You could usually tell who they were by their outfits. But this guy was in plain gray pants and a black t-shirt. They'd never seen him before. But one thing was for sure, he was powerful. Who is that guy? Steve, on the Quinjet, sighed in relief, seeing Wanda safe, but the man's identity was a mystery. His face was obscured on the live feed, and his build didn't give them any clues, and from what he'd done, he was clearly a force to be reckoned with. Steve knew he wasn't an Avenger. He'd have recognized him the second he appeared, and he couldn't recall anyone like that in their files. Is that the man who's been guiding Wanda from behind? Natasha focused on the figure. She had a gut feeling this was the guy Wanda had been dreaming about. It was the only thing that made sense. Wanda didn't know that many people, and the mysterious man she mentioned was the biggest question mark. The way Wanda instinctively sought him out confirmed it. When people were in danger, they went to the person they trusted most. I gotta say, this guy is stronger than we thought, Falcon, Sam said, frowning. Wanda's powers were volatile, sure, but she was still incredibly powerful, more so than most of them. She had even developed new abilities, and even with all that, she couldn't handle the woman in the black robes, but this man showed up and solved it easily. For now, all we know is he's on Wanda's side, Steve said. He didn't know who he was, but his actions proved he was an ally. Even if he didn't like them, he was keeping Wanda safe. Elsewhere, a black mecha flew through the air, leaving a white contrail. Tony was racing to Fruit Forest Beach in his Iron Man Mark 41 armor. Thank God, that he was watching the situation via his heads-up display. He was relieved that Wanda was okay. Friday, facial scan. Tony said, he needed to know who this guy was, and from his performance, he was a major player. If they could ID him, they could figure out if he was friend or foe, maybe even recruit him to the Avengers. Sorry, boss, the black fog's too thick, can't get a lock. Friday's voice came back. For all its sophistication, the onboard AI couldn't penetrate the dense fog and poor visibility. Never mind. Tony sighed. Even if he couldn't ID him now, he would once he arrived. Scene, Guilin Beach. The dark clouds swirled faster, creating a deep vortex. The sky looked like a ball of ink churning above them, a massive black hole bearing down. Boy, you really shouldn't have come here to die. Agatha's adrenaline surged, the feeling fueling her excitement. Her heart raced, and her expression grew feverish. Even with another enemy, she wasn't afraid. Burning your life away must be a real bummer, right? Hod lowered his hand, raising his chin to tease Agatha. Agatha's powers were growing, but her lifespan was shrinking. It was taking a toll on her body. Her face was already pale. Ha! You know a little magic, but you think you can beat me? You're just a kid. Agatha didn't take the bait. She looked down her nose at him. Her long life was what she prized the most. She had studied magic longer than anyone. With her strong magical foundation, amplified by her life force, no one could match her, and once she absorbed the chaos magic and phoenix force, it would all be worth it. This guy may have phoenix force, but he was likely just in his 20s. She wasn't scared of some kid. Plus, the more life she burned, the stronger she would become, in just a few seconds. She was far more powerful than before. If she had used this power on Wanda earlier, she would have been done in an instant. Old hag, you're proud of your age. Wanda popped her head out from behind Hod to toss out a jab. Hod was ready to fight, so she wasn't afraid of this witch. Slippery tongue. You're asking for it. Agatha's face twisted. She began chanting silently. The vortex above began to gather energy. Roar. A dragon's roar echoed from the black vortex. A massive shape writhed in the inky darkness, circling the sky. The power was world-shattering. Even Wanda's scalp tingled. As the figure emerged, the air grew thick, heavy with indescribable pressure. The wind howled, stirring up dozens of waterspouts on the sea. The waterspouts sucked seawater into the dark clouds, filling the air with the smell of salt. When the waterspouts reached the shore, they destroyed everything in their path. Lightning flashed, illuminating the earth in jagged cracks. It inspired fear, not hope. At the same time, the vortex spat out a black mass. It hung over Agatha, twisting and turning, like countless strands of black gas tangled together. In the next second, it began to take shape. A pair of feet covered in black scales and 3 toes emerged. As the black air coalesced, a shape emerged. It was a western black dragon with massive, fluttering wings. Its wings blotted out the sky, and the spikes on its body looked menacing. Every flap sent out a devastating hurricane that dispersed the nearby waterspouts. Roar. The black dragon roared, shaking the ground. The deafening sound created a vacuum in the falling rain. A gust of wind ripped through the area. The wind swept over the plants, sucking away their life. In an instant, they withered. The leaves turned to dust and blew away. Only bare branches and dried trunks remained. Death permeated the area. The dragon brought death to everything it touched. The atmosphere grew heavy and suffocating. Despair settled over the land. A dragon? How is that possible? Wanda's eyes widened in disbelief. She didn't know what it could do, but she felt the evil pouring from it. What kind of monster is that? Are we done for? There's no way he can beat that thing. It's too much. Why is this happening? Are we all going to die? It's a dragon. A black dragon, that the onlookers could only gape at the horror unfolding above them. They felt like they were suffocating, they wanted to beg for mercy, but fear had frozen them in place. They had imagined many things, but never a dragon. In the West, dragons were synonymous with evil. Something from fairy tales was now standing before them. They wanted to run, but couldn't move. It seemed all that awaited them was death. At the same time, the Quinjet was racing toward the beach, warning. We can't get any closer. The airflow is too unstable. We'll get torn apart. Natasha called from the cockpit. They could all feel the turbulence outside. Landing was impossible. Brace for a hard landing. Steve turned to the others, his face grim. Sam, provide cover. The enemy was too strange. They had summoned a dragon. It was beyond anything they'd expected. Wanda and her friend were outmatched. Rogers. I'm here. On land, Tony had crash-landed. His mecha could handle high winds, but it couldn't cope with this. He looked up at the sky, and his breath caught in his throat. Roar. Tony stared at the dragon, vast and powerful. The power of the dragon pressed down on the world. Everything seemed tiny. Tony, who thought he was invincible, felt powerless. He doubted all his missiles could put a dent in that thing. Roar. The black dragon unfurled its wings, creating a wave of hurricane-force winds. The wind shrieked, the open abyss rushed toward Hod and the other two. The open mouth seemed to swallow the world whole. Even Tony shuddered. It was a primal fear, not something that willpower could control. Everyone's hearts clenched. Their eyes were glued to the two figures in the air. Hod. Watch out. Despite her fear, Wanda stood her ground behind Hod. Don't worry, I got this. Hodder watched the scene unfold, a smile playing on his lips. His eyes flashed red, and for a moment, a phoenix filled the sky. Its wings shone pure and brilliant. The oppressive, deathly atmosphere shattered. Majesty filled the air. The wind stopped abruptly. The rain hung still in the air. Everything seemed frozen. The dragon shrank to the size of an ant as the phoenix materialized. It was like a god had appeared in the world. Boom! Fiery red wings burst from his back. A phoenix had arrived. Agatha had a black dragon that devoured everything, and Hod had a phoenix that created and destroyed everything. Chapter 54. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The phoenix blazed across the sky, a fiery red light banishing the darkness and the stench of death. It was a sun in the night, dazzling and brilliant. The world flipped the moment the phoenix appeared. A fire phoenix? No way. He summoned a phoenix. That's unbelievable. It's way more powerful than the black dragon. Did you see that hurricane vanish? Was that the phoenix's doing? I thought we were done for, but this guy's got way more juice than that old witch. People stared at the phoenix in awe, like gazing upon a god. When it appeared, the gales, tsunamis, and waterspouts all disappeared. Even the suffocating atmosphere lifted, like a rebirth. They could feel a vibrant energy coursing through them. Though wisps of black fog lingered, the dark clouds were already breaking apart. A sense of peace settled over everything, stripping away the fear. How are they doing this? What kind of power is that? Steve, leading the charge, stared up at the phoenix as he ran. He hadn't even seen it attack, but he could feel the overwhelming aura of holy power radiating from it. I didn't realize the mysterious guy Wanda knows was this powerful. Natasha, right behind him, sighed to herself. She knew he was strong, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. This wasn't a power that technology could touch. She was at a loss about it all. Rhodey. Fly up and see what's going on. Steve yelled, turning to Rhodey. He was the only one who could fly. I can't fly. Rhodey shouted back, his face grim. He didn't know what was happening. The wind was gone, but a new feeling was there. Like the sky itself was a no-fly zone, reserved for the phoenix. Not just physically, but in his very soul. He could barely get 10 feet off the ground. Tony felt the same resistance. But what floored him even more was what was happening around him. The trees and flowers had withered and turned to dust from the storm. But when the phoenix arrived, the landscape exploded back to life. New leaves burst forth, growing so fast you could watch it happen. The ground regained its vitality, spreading patches of green wherever you looked. Even dead trees sprouted leaves, greener and fresher than before. Steve and the others slowed to a stop, eyes wide at the spectacle unfolding around them. It was a miracle. It was easy to destroy, but bringing things back to life was an incredible thing to watch. The world was changing under the phoenix's light. The feeling was impossible to describe, like stepping into a fairy tale. "Is this creation?" Wanda murmured, tugging at Hood's sleeve. As a magic user, she could feel the raw power. The light itself was bringing life back to the world. And she could sense that it hadn't even unleashed its full force yet. But even this taste was enough to transform everything. Even the fear was fading with the light. The phoenix's power was immense, seemingly endless. She hadn't imagined Hood possessed anything this extraordinary. She'd thought he was terrifying before, but this was on another level. "Friday, scan his energy signature." After a moment, Tony snapped back to reality. Now was the time to confirm the guy's identity. "Boss, it matches the energy signature that took down the Bullman." Friday confirmed instantly. "So, Wanda's mysterious helper, that's you." Tony looked up at the blurred figure and sighed. Deep down, he'd already known it. But the sheer magnitude of the guy's power was more than he'd imagined. He was grateful that he'd listened to Hood when he had urged them to back off. If this guy had turned on the Avengers, they'd have been toast. Caw. Caw, the phoenix wheeled in the sky, wings spread wide, unleashing a ripple of fire. The sound wasn't piercing, but it resonated with a sense of absolute authority. This was the strongest force in existence. The black dragon's gaping maw drew closer. The phoenix flapped its wings with incredible force, a wave of fiery energy blasted outward. Roar. The black dragon shrieked, thrown backward by the impact. The energy didn't stop there. It turned into a massive wind, tearing away the oppressive dark clouds. Even the swirling vortex began to melt under its touch. Whoosh, in an instant, dazzling sunlight bathed everything. With a single flap, the oppressive darkness was gone. The sky was clear and blue, a perfect sunny day after a storm. Warm light washed over the land, the trees and flowers were dripping with rain and shone brilliantly green. It was like the whole world had been scrubbed clean. Roar. The black dragon, in retreat, whimpered in terror, shrinking back on itself. "How is this possible?" Agatha trembled, her voice filled with dread. How could he wield power like that? Impossible. Agatha knew that Hood's Phoenix Force was very pure, but it was very difficult to use the Phoenix Force. Because the Phoenix Force had its own will, it would never be willing to be used recklessly by the other party. To achieve such an effect, at least hundreds of years of contact would be required before it could be so mature. "You've lived this long and still haven't learned anything," Hood said coldly. "Nothing is impossible." Agatha's power was just some parlor trick she'd picked up from that dusty old book. It was nothing compared to the Phoenix Force, one of the three most powerful and ancient magics ever known. The black dragon was big and scary, but it was all bark and no bite. Facing the phoenix, the power of death was just a decoration. "Damn it!" Agatha hissed, grinding her teeth. She wouldn't give up, not yet. Even if there was a sliver of a chance, she had to get that power for herself. "You're going down." She took a deep breath, fighting through the pain, and focused her energy into her palms. A purple light twisted and coiled, forming a dark vortex. "Have at you!" Boom! Agatha thrust her hands forward, launching the vortex at Hood like a horizontal tornado. At the same time, she commanded the black dragon to attack. If either of them could just touch him, she might be able to turn things around. She was betting that Hood couldn't multitask at that level. Controlling the phoenix had to be taking all of his attention. "Ha!" Hood sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. You really overestimate yourself. Still fighting it, huh? That her little light show was nothing more than a joke. He casually snapped his fingers, and the phoenix swooped down from the sky, with unstoppable force. It slammed into the black dragon, obliterating the vortex on the way. The phoenix struck the black dragon like a meteor. Huge gashes opened across the dragon's body. Its fearful cries echoed through the air. It couldn't even put up a fight. The phoenix tore into it with its talons, sending chunks of dark mist scattering in all directions. Roar, the black dragon wailed, but the phoenix showed no mercy. Its fiery red feathers began to dim, shifting into something else entirely, the purest essence of death. As it spread, the black dragon under its claws began to disintegrate into black particles. The dragon thrashed, as if it had encountered its natural predator. Compared to the black dragon's meager deathly aura, the phoenix's was like opening a portal to hell. The terrifying energy spread rapidly, and even though it was somewhat suppressed, the flowers and trees withered and died as it passed. In less than a second, the vibrant green landscape turned to dust. What the hell is going on? That's the breath of destruction. Tony's eyes darted wildly. He never imagined it could do this. This guy could create life, restore anything that had died, even better than before, but he could also destroy life, annihilate everything in an instant. Even a whiff of it was enough to kill everything it touched. Tony, Steve and the others finally caught up. What's happening? They noticed the changes around them. It was all too much to take in. They didn't even know what to do. I don't know, but that guy's behind it all. Tony stared at the figure in the sky. He needed to know who this guy was. Power like this was something they should have known about. If it weren't for Wanda, they wouldn't have even known this guy existed. Look at the plants. Natasha shouted. They all turned to look. The dead plants were changing again. Their edges began to dissipate, turning into fine black particles that floated toward the sky, like something was crushing them bit by bit. The black particles drifted upwards, like black ash after a fire. Everyone was stunned, the pressure almost unbearable. This sensation of death was far more oppressive and terrifying than anything Agatha had thrown at them. The power levels were incomparable. Roar, the black dragon was fading fast. It was too weak to even roar, as if begging for help. The phoenix spread its wings, and waves of red fire washed over everything. The next second, an overwhelming torrent of flames erupted from its body. This fire, burning with the will to destroy, consumed most of the sky. Facing this nightmare, Agatha gritted her teeth and clasped her hands together. A vortex appeared between her palms. She tried to absorb the phoenix's power, to steal it for herself, but her eyes widened as she realized that it was rejecting her. It couldn't be digested. It thrashed against her will, damaging her body. As the fiery red waves washed over her, she was swallowed whole. She plummeted to the ground. Damn it! What is this power? Agatha was defeated. She'd never considered that the Phoenix Force would be so selective, so loyal to its chosen one. I guess I'm out of options. Agatha knew that staying meant death. She lashed out, sending black energy spewing from her robes. Just as she was about to teleport away, a figure appeared above her. A terrifying force slammed into her, extinguishing the black energy. Where do you think you're going? WandaHod lightly tapped Agatha on the head. Whoosh, star. Boom. Star. She felt a sharp pain and crashed into the ground like a cannonball. The earth shook, the ground gave way, and a shockwave ripped through the air. Everyone stood there, dumbstruck. Wait, this guy, he's not just a magician. He's strong, too. He just tapped her. Chapter 55. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding. You successfully killed Agatha Harkness. Reward, unconscious Phoenix Force Fragment. Hod never imagined he'd actually get a Phoenix Force Fragment. This is going to seriously level up his powers. I mean, he's already crazy strong. With this third fragment, his original power will get a huge boost. Picking a fight with Thanos would be like swatting a fly. Guess the old witch wasn't a total loss. At least she left me something useful, Hod thought. He wasn't planning on taking over the planet or anything, but this kind of power could protect him and the people he cared about. Fuse. The moment Hod had the thought, the system-rewarded Phoenix Force fragment merged into him. Instantly, a scorching energy surged through his body, coursing through him relentlessly. This raw energy washed over him, subtly reinforcing every part of his being. In his mind, a fiery red phoenix appeared, but unlike before, this time it simply glanced at him before vanishing. The Phoenix.Hod felt that with each Phoenix Force piece he absorbed, the Phoenix Force itself was changing. It no longer felt like immense pressure, but more like an equal. While these fragments were dormant, that didn't mean they were easily controlled. More Phoenix Force just meant better control. As the fragment integrated, he instinctively closed his eyes. Even without looking, he could sense the slightest movement of every living thing around him, an unobstructed 360-degree awareness. He was even building a mental map of everything in his vicinity, constructed from the presence of these creatures: grass, trees, ants. He could sense it all. He could even, if he chose, control life and death within that radius. This was beyond anything Hod had imagined. He was sure he could take on Odin and win. Hands down, the Phoenix Force had transformed. It wasn't quite multi-universal yet, but more than enough to handle Odin. He was basically a god now. This incredible power left him awestruck. It was what he'd always wanted. The sheer control over life and death was intoxicating. Below him, "This guy's power is insane." Tony gulped, his Adam's apple bobbing. He couldn't believe such a thing was possible, and he seemed to be connected to Wanda somehow. "I can't tell if he's friend or foe," Steve said gravely. He'd sensed the immense power radiating from Hod, more powerful than anything he'd ever faced. That finger? He wouldn't have stood a chance. With the Phoenix gone, I can finally feel the suppression lifting. We can fly again. Falcon, Sam, realized the force holding them back had vanished. "I'm going up to see who he is." Tony gritted his teeth, a flicker of determination in his eyes. He didn't know if it was a good idea to approach this guy, but, witnessing his power had only amplified his fear. He needed to know who this was. Now was his chance. But then, the air shimmered. Buzz. A bright circle of light opened directly beneath Hod. The golden ring enveloped him, and in an instant, he was gone. Hod. Wanda, hovering nearby, stared in disbelief. He'd vanished in the blink of an eye. She hadn't even had time to react. What's more, while the light seemed magical, the residual energies were already fading. She couldn't track him through the magical residue. "Friday, what just happened?" Tony, seeing Wanda's confusion, asked urgently. "Boss, I detected a spatial distortion. Someone created a teleportation channel." Friday replied. "A teleportation channel?" Tony was surprised. Out of thin air, that when Loki invaded, he'd used a wormhole, but Loki couldn't just waltz through it like this. Meanwhile, at the Ancient One's sanctuary, Hod was equally surprised. He stood in the courtyard, taking it all in. "This place looks familiar." He knew a lot of places in the Marvel Universe, but he couldn't always instantly place them. He'd let this force take him because he sensed no malice. Otherwise, the portal wouldn't have opened in the first place. Not bad, though. Hod smelled the incense and felt a sense of calm. Nearby, a monk with a missing hand was drawing water, seemingly unfazed by Hod's sudden arrival. "Hod, come, have some tea with me." The Ancient One's calm, distant voice echoed from behind him. "So, it's the Sorcerer Supreme." Turning, Hod greeted her by title. He saw the Ancient One sitting cross-legged before an ancient-looking tea table. A kettle steamed gently beside her. He'd sensed every life form around him upon arrival. The Ancient One was well hidden, but he'd still picked up on her presence. He just needed to see her to be sure. "It seems you are indeed very special, much more so than I anticipated." The Ancient One smiled wryly and shook her head. The Phoenix Force in Hod's body was stronger than she'd imagined. "Try my tea. It's nothing special, but you won't find it anywhere else." The Ancient One gestured with her right hand, inviting him. Hod's defeat of Agatha had proven he was powerful enough to be treated as an equal. "All right, I've never had this before. It's got a hint of Chinese herbs." Hod accepted and took a sip. The fragrance lingered, and a pleasant warmth spread through him. The Ancient One definitely had some good stuff stashed away. "This tea is rare. Even I don't drink much of it." "You're in for a treat, Mr. Hod." The Ancient One refilled his cup to the halfway point. The Sorcerer Supreme invited me here just to sample tea. Hod raised an eyebrow, a smile playing on his lips. He wasn't surprised she wanted to see him. The fight had caused quite a stir. If Tony knew, so would the Ancient One. He was just wondering why. The power flowing through you is the Phoenix Force. The Ancient One withdrew her hand, her smile fading, replaced by a serious expression. The Phoenix Force was a terrifying entity. It possessed incredible power, but was notoriously difficult to control. In fact, a single emotional outburst could destroy the entire universe. That wasn't an exaggeration. The Phoenix Force could do it. Even facing the Phoenix Force, she wasn't sure she could win. She'd sensed the sheer force Hod had unleashed. From what she understood, he was close to losing control. That was why she'd invited him, hoping to help him understand the power he wielded. I know. It's the Phoenix Force. Hod nodded calmly, ignoring the surprised look of the one-handed monk. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. Sorcerer Supreme, I just finished a fight. Mind if I smoke? Go ahead. The Ancient One nodded. Hod didn't wait for confirmation. He took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and lit it with a flick of his fingers. He took a deep drag. Hod, you don't understand how dangerous this power is. That the Ancient One, her voice steady, continued. The Phoenix Force is destructive. It can destroy everything. That she wanted him to take this seriously. It was about the safety of the universe. If it spiraled out of control, no one could stop it. I know very well that the Phoenix Force can not only destroy everything, but also create everything. Hod exhaled a stream of smoke, propped himself up with one hand, and stretched out his legs. He had a pretty good idea of what she wanted. It seems you understand the Phoenix Force, but there's something you may not know. The Ancient One paused, studying his face. She shook her head and said, it's dark magic. Without guidance, you will lose control. That she'd been watching him closely, hoping to glean some emotion, but Hod had remained completely calm. Even when she called the Phoenix Force dark magic, she saw no fear. That alone set him apart from most people. Let's be honest. You want me to join Comprehension, right? Hod put out his cigarette, opened a portal to a trash can, and tossed the butt. In that case, I'm turning you down. He had zero interest in living in this cold, remote place. He was living the good life. Why would he come here to suffer? Plus, he wasn't interested in being a world-saving hero. He'd rather spend his time with Wanda. You. The Ancient One was taken aback, then smiled and shook her head. I know what you're thinking. It's your choice. I won't force you. She really did want Hod to join Comprehension. Under her guidance, he'd be less likely to lose control, which would better protect the universe, but she couldn't force him to do something he didn't want to do. Master Ancient One, if dark magic is so terrible, Hod said with a sly grin, why are you practicing it, too? He snapped his fingers. The Phoenix Force flashed, and a symbol appeared on the Ancient One's forehead, a clear mark of dark magic. How do you know? For the first time, the Ancient One's calm facade wavered. I know you've been looking for a successor so you can fake your death and escape the consequences of dark magic, Hod said, but that person isn't me. It's Steven. The Ancient One had borrowed power from Dormammu. Dormammu was a dark dimension demon god. The price was to pay the soul. How could she pay the soul? Therefore, the mark on Ancient One's head is compensation. If she erases the mark, she will pay a heavy price. That's why she needed someone to take over so she could retire. How could you know that? The Ancient One's face was grave, barely containing her shock. If she didn't have the eye of Agamotto, she'd think Hod could see the past and future. This had been her plan all along, but Hod's appearance had made her reconsider. There's nothing inherently wrong with dark magic. As long as you don't abuse it, you're still the Sorcerer Supreme. Despite the Ancient One's shock, Hod didn't bother being cautious. He knew she was hiding something. Anyone else would kill to keep this secret, but not the Ancient One. She had a code and a strong sense of morality. He wasn't worried about her turning on him. You are very special. The Ancient One sipped her lukewarm tea. I'm asking you to protect Steven in the future, that if she was stuck with her original plan, she still wanted to protect the growing Steven, and Hod was the best candidate. Sorry, I don't want to babysit a know-it-all, Hod refused instantly. He just had to think about Steven's face, and he was already shaking his head, the Ancient One sighed. If the Earth is ever in danger, can you help? Hod poured himself some tea. He nodded seriously. Don't worry about that. I'm used to living here. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. New York, Goulburn Beach. The beach was a disaster zone, sealed off with heavy police cordons, red and blue lights flashing everywhere. It looked like there were hundreds of cops on the scene, all in shock. They'd seen the aftermath of Avengers battles before, but this was something else entirely. We want to interview Scarlet Witch. We're reporters. We have a right to know. Let us through for interviews. We demand a statement from the Avengers on the current situation. That the reporters were going nuts outside the police lines, clamoring to get in, no chance, and the worst part was, nobody could figure out what had happened. All they knew was that some mysterious person had shown up. Whether this person was with the Avengers or not was a total mystery. Wanda sat on a bizarre-looking bench on the beach, staring blankly at the waves. Hood, where are you? That she wasn't even bothering to acknowledge the reporters. Right after Hood disappeared, she'd caught a faint whiff of another person's presence, a woman, most likely. The more she saw Hood's power, the more she worried someone would snatch him away. Wanda. Steve and the other Avengers approached, concerned. You okay? That they'd noticed the bench she'd conjured up. They had to help evacuate the injured first, so they didn't get the chance to check up on her until the cops showed up. You don't look good. Want me to take you to lie down? Natasha knelt beside Wanda, putting an arm around her. Wanda was clearly not okay, she looked heartbroken. I'm fine. Wanda shook her head, her voice flat. She'd been through a tough fight, but she wasn't seriously hurt, and Hood had taken care of the blood surging through her body. I know you're upset, Tony said, stepping forward. But can you tell us who that guy was? That they weren't trying to pry, but seeing the mysterious man's strength had them worried. Even more worrying was that someone so powerful was completely unknown. Something wasn't right. I'm with Tony on this one. This is different, Steve added, siding with Tony for once. If they could recruit this guy, it would be a major boost for their missions. Wanda hesitated, her eyes clouded. Should she reveal Hood's identity? She wanted to keep it a secret, at least until they were officially a couple, but her teammates were clearly freaked out by Hood. She could feel it, fear, worry, even hostility. We get it, you don't want to tell us, Rhodes said. But at least tell us whose side he's on. That was the key. They were scared because they didn't know if he was friend or foe. That made all the difference. The fight had been more intense than a full-scale war. They needed to know what this guy was all about, and why he had jumped in to protect Wanda. Wanda looked at their anxious faces. She knew Hood wouldn't mind her telling them. Besides, Tony and Hood seemed to be friends, so it probably wouldn't be a problem. After a long silence, she finally spoke. He's my boyfriend. The words hung in the air. Everyone's eyes nearly popped. Nobody had seen that coming. They'd been thinking mentor, savior, something like that, but a boyfriend? Only Natasha looked like she'd already figured it out. She'd guessed it earlier, and she was right. Boyfriend? Tony's mouth dropped. When did this happen? He never suspected Wanda had a boyfriend, but now it all clicked. Why Wanda had been staying out all night, why she'd been in such a good mood, why he had stepped in to protect her when she was attacked. It all made sense. We started dating about 2 weeks ago. Wanda shrugged. If she hadn't gotten drunk that night, she never would have imagined finding a boyfriend this way, but she still felt awkward answering their questions. Hood was her boyfriend, but they hadn't even officially defined the relationship. I knew it. The second I saw you come back, I knew you had a boyfriend. Natasha grinned. You knew this the whole time? Steve was surprised. Is that even a question? Natasha rolled her eyes. Only you knuckleheads didn't see it. And she didn't mention that Wanda had been walking a little funny when she came back, even though she tried to hide it. You didn't even tell us. Steve was a little hurt. they were supposed to trust each other, and Avengers families needed special protection. Then he remembered that this guy probably didn't need their protection, it was more like the other way around. Who is this guy? But even knowing he was probably on their side, Tony couldn't let it go, he had to know who he was. Wanda bit her lip, shaking her head slightly. I'll tell you when the time is right, that they weren't even officially together yet, and she still felt guilty calling Hood her boyfriend. How long is that gonna take? Tony sighed. Wanda might look shy, but once she made up her mind, nothing could stop her. Ding. Wanda's phone buzzed, she checked the message. Hood, an old woman wants to have tea. Meet me at her place tonight. She glanced up and saw a hand waving from the window of the Bumblebee. The Camaro roared to life and sped away. Something over there. Tony noticed Wanda staring into the distance, but saw nothing. Nothing. Let's go face the music with the reporters. Wanda, suddenly cheerful, stood up and headed toward the press. On a road in the dense forest, the yellow Camaro sped down the road. Music poured from the open windows. Now I know you got it. Hood gripped the steering wheel, feeling the engine's power. Man, this is the life. He sighed. Cruising down a forest road in a sports car at sunset was a feeling like no other. Then Hood's brow furrowed. Something was falling from the sky in the distance, trailing flames. It looked like it was headed right for him. Boom. The ground shook as a fireball crashed down. No way. Did I just see a meteorite? Hood was surprised. What were the odds of this happening on his way back? He was curious. A meteorite was just a rock, but he wanted to check it out. He hit the gas and came to a huge crater in the middle of the road. He parked the car and walked over. The crater was about 30 feet across. The heat had scorched the surrounding area, the air smelled burnt, and smoke still rose from the ground. Doesn't look like a meteorite. Hood reached the crater's edge, crouching down. Even if the meteorite had been vaporized, there should still be some kind of residue. He stood up and looked around. He saw some tracks near the crater's edge. Following the tracks, he found footprints leading into the forest. They weren't clear, but he was sure someone had gone into the woods. Maybe I should take a look. Hood scratched his chin, hesitated, then followed the footprints. The footprints disappeared into the trees. He followed them into the woods. Before long, Hood, who was focused on the footprints, grinned. Whoosh. A gust of wind rushed at him from behind, someone trying to sneak up on him. Hood responded with a double dragon to the sea, and froze. That was soft. He couldn't help but squeeze a little. Hiss. The figure stumbled backward, face flushed. Hood finally saw who it was, a pale woman with heavy eyeliner, holding two strange, sharp blades. Hela. Hood recognized her. Her skin was cold and pale, like snow under the moonlight, and her eyes were deep black. She wore dark green armor, the armor of Hela, goddess of death. It really was Hela. Wasn't she locked up? Hood was surprised, and even more surprised she'd try to give him a feel right as they met. Even when using double dragon to the sea, it was a little comfortable. You're one of Odin's lackeys. Not only did you follow me, but you dared. Hela gritted her teeth, her face twisted. She had sensed someone following her and tried to ambush them, but they hadn't played fair. One move and they'd hit her where it hurt, forcing her to retreat. She had only escaped because a powerful force had been born on Earth. She had taken advantage of its influence on the seal to break free, the power of the Phoenix. She knew how powerful it was. She was the god of death, but the power of the Phoenix was on another level. If she had that power, she could return to the realm of the gods. But not long after she escaped, Odin found her. This guy had been on her tail since she landed. Wait, are you serious? Hood pointed at the ground. Look at these footprints. You don't think anyone could follow that? That he couldn't believe the goddess of death was saying something so ridiculous. Anyone would follow those tracks. Just because you're right doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. You still have to be reasonable. If the reason wasn't on his side, Hood would never admit it. You. Hela saw the footprints and looked embarrassed. She really hadn't thought about those. What do you mean, you? And I was just being cautious. Hood was indignant. Liar. Hela swung her blades. Let Odin come and talk to me in person. That she didn't believe him for a second. how else could he have found her so quickly? Even though their first exchange was weak, he had dodged her attack, there was only one possibility. I'm not from the God realm. Hood was speechless. Did anyone from the God realm dress like him? Shut up. I don't believe you, Hela lunged. She was in front of Hood in a heartbeat, her blades crossed, slashing down. Hood stepped back, barely dodging, her right leg slammed against the swords, bam. What force! So much power. Hela flew backward, she kicked off the tree trunk, launching herself at Hood with more force. Hood easily avoided her attack. Is that all you've got? Bam. Hood kicked. Hela flew out, smashing through several trees before stopping, her blood was boiling. Damn you, Odin's lackey! Hela summoned dark green energy, boom. Death energy blasted toward Hood. Please. Hood waved his hand, fiery red power of the phoenix swirled in front of him, the surrounding trees and flowers turned to ash, Hela's death energy was snuffed out. Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Whoosh! A dark red light exploded, instantly withering the trees around them. Wherever the light touched, the ground turned to black dust, everything aged at warp speed. When Hela's death energy slammed into the Phoenix Force shield, it dissolved like snow hitting lava. This is the Phoenix Force. Hela's eyes widened with a crazed look the moment she recognized the power. She couldn't believe the person she'd been searching for was right in front of her. Seeing the death ray was useless, she cut the energy feed and charged forward, a slight smile playing on her lips. She'd been testing the Phoenix Force's strength, that's all. You want to fight? Let's go all the way then. Seeing Hela rush him, Hod didn't hold back, igniting his right fist with dark red energy. The Phoenix Force condensed rapidly, looking like a ball of fire in his hand, whoosh. The air cracked, Hod vanished from his spot, moving so fast it created a sonic boom. Hela's pupils shrank as Hod seemed to teleport right in front of her, his charged fist slammed into her stomach, hitting upwards, bang. She was launched 10 feet into the air from the punch. If she hadn't concentrated her death energy in her abdomen at the last second, the blow would have seriously injured her. Hod didn't usually hit women, but she was no ordinary person, and if he didn't fight back, he'd be stuck here all day, boom. Ha ha ha, that landing hard. Hela clutched her stomach and grinned, fear mixed in her expression. Despite the pain, her smile widened, as if she'd just won the lottery. Her gaze locked on Hod, a mix of pain and joy on her face. Something seriously wrong with your look. Hod frowned at her. Hela looked like she wanted to eat him, her pale skin flushed slightly. It was like, no, I beat you up, and you're turned on. What is this, some kind of kinky SM thing? Even though she looked pretty good, he wasn't feeling it, the situation was all wrong. Ahem, Hela sucked in a breath, retracting her blades into her forearms. Midgardian, I believe you're not Odin's lapdog. Hod's fighting skills had definitely surprised her. Controlling the Phoenix Force wasn't easy. Possessing such power and controlling it so well, he'd be able to take everything from Odin if he returned to Asgard. The thought filled her with desire, a hunger for power that could change her situation completely, and after that brief fight, she was sure he could even take down Odin. You're seriously messed up. Hod felt uneasy under her gaze. Normally, he'd only get that look from Wanda. Now it was reversed, and it made his skin crawl. He felt tainted by her eyes. Midgardian, come back to Asgard with me, and I'll grant you all the riches and luxuries you can imagine. Hela lifted her chin, a confident smile on her face. No one could resist an offer like that. Ill. Hod's mouth twitched, finally managing to get the words out. She was clearly off her rocker. She gets beat up, then gets excited, and looks happy. Nothing about that was normal. He suspected her brain was fried after being locked up for so long. How else could she be trying to win him over? Haven't you heard of the goddess of death? Hela noticed his skeptical expression and asked, puzzled. Everyone should know her name. Nope. Hod shook his head, looking at her strangely. She didn't exactly have a good reputation with him, and where did she get this confidence? She'd been pummeled by him, yet she was still so sure of herself. It didn't make sense. Besides, he had zero interest in some ghost town like Asgard. As long as you follow me, I can give you anything you want. Hela's voice dropped, her expression turning dark. She couldn't believe this Midgardian was giving her the cold shoulder. At first, she figured he'd never heard of her, so he'd rejected her without thinking, but his dismissive look made it clear he knew about Asgard. And someone with his power should be aware of these things. Cut the crap. What exactly can you give me? Hod rolled his eyes. You can't even beat Odin. Go find a motel and get some sleep. He was blunt, and she was selling a pipe dream. Someone else might buy it, sure, but he knew the plot. With what she had, she'd never take down Odin. Besides, he wasn't stupid enough to live under someone else's roof when he could be the king where he was. He flatly rejected her, turning away. He planned to leave. No point wasting time with this psycho. Fighting her was just a waste of time. He knew Hela possessed the goddess of death powers. Unless Asgard was destroyed, she was immortal. All he was doing was making her feel good. It was the first time he'd run into something so outrageous. Most people got more scared the more they fought, but not her. He wasn't about to give her any more pleasure. Bad things would follow if he did. Better to let her go make trouble with Asgard herself. Don't leave. Hela extended her blades, dark green energy swirling around them. She crouched, ready to spring, crossing the blades in front of her chest. Bang. She launched herself at Hod like a cannonball. A terrifying cyclone vibrated around the blades, the breath of death washing over Hod. The entire forest shuddered, the trees withered rapidly, as if being drained by the Grim Reaper himself. Damn it, what a psycho! Hod glared at her, a black line forming on his face. Did she even listen to what he said? He'd said he didn't want to go, but she was forcing him. It'd be fine if he could beat her, but this was a one-sided beatdown. What was worse, she was indestructible. Fighting her was a waste of time. Facing the charging Hela, he sighed, planting his left foot and swinging his right leg in a massive whip. Bang! The kick created a violent shockwave. With a sonic boom, his foot connected hard with Hela's abdomen. Boom! Bang, bang, bang! Hela was launched like a cooked shrimp, curling into a ball. She flew backwards in a hurricane of wind, scattering withered leaves everywhere. It was as if something had carved a path through the forest. Trees crashed down, but they couldn't slow her down. She burst out of the forest, like a missile shooting into the sky. In a blink, she disappeared. Phew! Hod sighed and wiped his forehead. Though he wasn't sweating, he'd kicked her like she was an intercontinental ballistic missile. She'd probably fly a couple 100 miles at least. He really didn't want to argue with the crazy woman, so he just kicked her away. She couldn't possibly cling to him like a dogskin plaster now, right? No. Hod's eyes widened. He finally understood why she was so obsessed with him. It could only be one thing, the Phoenix Force. Too many people wanted the Phoenix Force. Hela was no different. Plus, she wanted to overthrow Odin and needed powerful allies. That was the only explanation for her near-death look. What a headache. I should have used other methods earlier. Hod sighed. Once people knew he had the Phoenix Force, this would happen more and more. He'd be like a Tang monk, with everyone drooling over him. Whether they could swallow him or not, they'd all want a bite. The thought gave him a headache. He regretted walking into that grove. Not every star was lucky. This time he got a pervert falling from the sky. Forget it, don't think about it anymore. Shaking his head, Hod used the Phoenix Force to restore the forest, then headed towards Bumblebee. Wanda was coming over tonight. His mood brightened at the thought. He couldn't wait for tonight. Meanwhile, above New York City, a black figure zipped through the sky. It was so fast it created sonic booms. All anyone could see was a break in the clouds. The force it carried slammed into the skyscraper's windows, rattling the glass. Boom. Mom, what's that? A missile? Silly child, don't be ridiculous. That must be Iron Man. Did Iron Man upgrade his armor? He's never flown so fast before. Looks like the Avengers are getting stronger. Many New Yorkers noticed the scene, but weren't too surprised. Iron Man and the others flew overhead all the time. After a quick glance, they went back to their business. Beep beep. Energy surge detected in the sky. It's moving fast and crossing the United States. Tony, sitting on the stone, suddenly heard Friday's urgent message. Energy surge. What level? Tony's expression turned serious. He'd just wrapped up the situation at Guilin Beach. There couldn't be any more problems. Boss, the energy level is low, but the speed is extremely high, Friday responded. Can you calculate the destination? Tony asked, looking worried. According to calculations, it should be the North Pole. The North Pole? Tony twitched his mouth and shook his head. Don't worry about it. The government was probably testing some missiles or something. Since Stark Industries stopped selling weapons, the government had poured money into researching new weapons. This was probably one of them. Besides, the destination was the North Pole. Even if it exploded, it wouldn't matter. Flying for an untold amount of time, the figure crossed half the world, heading straight for the North Pole. Bang! Boom! With a loud crash, the figure slammed into the glacier, unmelted for thousands of years, shattered from the impact. The movement triggered an avalanche. After some time, a hand reached out from the thick snow. Ahem! Hela crawled out of the snow, looking pained. The powerful kick had even shredded her armor. Where did that kick land? She wiped the blood from her mouth and groaned. She'd blacked out from the force of the kick. When she woke up, she was here. I'm too weak. Hela slumped in the snow, looking defeated. Her true strength was far greater, but being sealed for so long had sapped it. But what bothered her most was that Hod knocked her out with a single kick. That had never happened before, not even against Odin. Ha ha ha. A moment later, Hela's excited laughter echoed across the glacier. This is too perfect. With that strength, he could be a massive help. If she could bring him under her wing, the goddess of death would be even more powerful. Baby, my baby, you must become one of the goddesses of death, and we should conquer the entire universe together. Hela laughed maniacally, shaking with excitement, as if she'd found the happiest thing in the world. It'd take time to win over the guy with the Phoenix Force, but it'd all be worth it if she could get her hands on the power of the Phoenix, or get Horde to work for her. Sooner or later, she'd drag the high and mighty Odin down from his throne and take Asgard back. But now, Hela pushed herself up from the ice. I need to find somewhere to recover my strength first. She knew with her current strength, she'd just get kicked away if she went after Hood. She wouldn't make another rash move until she was stronger. Wait for me. When I regain my strength, I'm coming for you again, my little darling. Hela's voice, tinged with madness, echoed on the glacier. Chapter 58. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The news about what happened at Fruit Grove Beach today was plastered all over the screens on New York's Central Avenue. Even the newsstands nearby were pushing out special reports about the Fruit Grove Beach incident and, of course, Scarlet Witch's contributions. This was definitely Stark Industries pulling strings behind the scenes to get the word out fast and promote her image. Even though it didn't really involve the Avengers directly, right now, all the comments about Scarlet Witch were positive. I never knew Scarlet Witch was so powerful. Good thing she was at Fruit Grove Beach today. Seriously. If she hadn't been there, those tourists would be flatter than my Uncle Tom's blueberry pie. Looks like we misjudged her. What happened before must have just been an accident. But who's that mystery guy? Is he a new Avenger? People couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief as they watched the reports. They knew from previous news stories that if their house or car got damaged in a superhero fight, Stark Industries would cover the costs. They even helped with medical bills for civilians injured before the heroes arrived. That was a huge relief for most people. All they wanted was a normal life, but they were even more curious about the mystery guy. He totally turned the tide of the battle, and judging from the live feed, he was seriously good-looking. Meanwhile, back in Queens, bare feet padded softly on the carpet as a figure wrapped in a bath towel lounged on the sofa, scrolling through their phone. The scent of shower gel filled the air, and soothing music played from the speakers. Wait a minute. Isn't that Mr. Hood? Gwen sat bolt upright when she saw the news report. Her bathrobe slipped down a bit, but she didn't even notice. She was completely focused on her phone. She immediately pulled up the live broadcast and watched closely. Even though she couldn't see his face clearly, she recognized his clothes and movements. It was definitely Mr. Hood, the one she couldn't stop thinking about. Mr. Hood saved so many people. That's incredible. She gripped her phone, her toes curling with excitement, her cheeks, already flushed from the shower, turned even rosier. She was so happy that the man she was crushing on had done something so amazing. He's so low-key, just like me. Hood disappeared from the scene during the live broadcast. In her mind, he was just the kind of guy who got the job done and then vanished, not looking for any credit. That made him even more attractive. She couldn't help but remember everything that had happened in the clock tower that day, the suffocating feeling, the neon lights on her face. It was all burned into her memory. I'm so bold. Remembering everything, Gwen's face flushed red, all the way to the tips of her ears. Her whole body felt warm. If she didn't have plans for tomorrow, she'd probably go see Hood right now. Gwen, her mother, Helen, called from downstairs, come down for some warm milk. The sudden call snapped Gwen out of her thoughts. Coming, she called back, quickly changed into her pajamas and slippers, and headed downstairs. In the living room, George was leaning over the dining table, reading the newspaper with a magnifying glass. Those superheroes are something else, he said. He hadn't been at Fruit Grove Beach because he didn't have field work, but his colleagues said it was a wild scene. He shook his head in amazement as he read the paper. Tell me about it, Helen said as she set down the warm milk. She hadn't really cared for superheroes before, but lately, she'd changed her mind. There were always people out there carrying the weight of the world, and with superheroes around, George was safer. Otherwise, he'd be the first one to run into danger. She couldn't stand the thought of anything happening to him. I just wish the world would be peaceful for once. George sighed, sounding frustrated. He'd been catching up on all the old cases since he got back to work, and the more he read, the more worried he got. There were too few peaceful days. Mom, Gwen skipped downstairs, humming a song. She was beaming like she'd just won the lottery. As long as Hood was doing good, she was happy for him. Helen had never seen Gwen so cheerful. Ever since George woke up, Gwen had mostly been down in the dumps. She might crack a smile every now and then, but now she was practically glowing. Gwen, are you in love? Helen might be getting older, but she could still tell when someone had a crush. Their eyes just gave it away. Gwen was so smitten she didn't even glance at the milk. Huh? Gwen jumped, nearly spilling her milk. She hadn't expected her mom to figure it out so fast. You're my daughter. I can tell, Helen said, pulling up a chair next to Gwen and taking her hand. Want to talk about it? Gwen shook her head, then nodded. They were close, but they hadn't exactly made things official yet. She could tell Hood liked her, but she wasn't completely sure. Wait, you're really in love? George, who was still reading the paper, put it down and looked concerned. He couldn't believe his daughter was falling in love so soon. How old was she? He didn't want any creeps taking advantage of her. Relax, she's in college now, Helen said, shaking her head at George. Right. I forgot she's all grown up, George said, scratching his head awkwardly. He'd been out of it for so long he still thought of Gwen as a little kid. Since she was in college, it wasn't a huge deal. As long as it didn't mess with her studies, he was fine with it. He and Helen had started dating in high school, after all. Gwen, Helen said, looking her in the eye with a gentle smile. I hope you'll bring him over to meet us. They didn't know anything about Gwen's boyfriend, but it was always a good idea to meet the guy. They wanted to see who had caught Gwen's eye. I'll try. I'll bring him around when the time's right, Gwen said, taking a deep breath and nodding with determination. She wanted her family's approval once things were official, but first, she had to figure out how to get Hood to be her boyfriend. Back at the manor, Hood's first order of business was a shower. He put on a bathrobe and sprawled on the custom sofa. Turn on the TV and play the news, he said calmly, looking relaxed. He always watched the news to keep up with what was going on. After seeing the report, he smirked. Sometimes, playing superhero can be fun. Hood took a sip of coffee milk and sighed. It felt good to be a show-off once in a while, and he hadn't even been recognized, but it was just a temporary thing. If you did it all the time, it would lose its appeal. Like Tony Stark, he could have just been a playboy, but he insisted on saving the world. Turns out, anything fun gets tiring when it becomes a job. He leaned his head back on the sofa. It's better to be a hero for fun. Besides, the Scarlet Witch had given him a nice surprise, so it wasn't a waste of time. Our reporter has found evidence of a meteorite landing in the suburbs of New York today. After the Fruit Grove Beach story, the reporter moved on to other news. Hood sighed and rubbed his forehead when he saw the giant crater in the middle of the road. I hope Hella won't bother me again, he muttered. That woman was like superglue. He figured there would be more trouble down the line. Maybe I should just drop 100-ton weight on her and keep her underwater, he thought. Hella might be tough, but she wasn't invincible. Just because she couldn't die didn't mean he couldn't trap her. Still, thinking about how soft her skin was. Where's Wanda? Hood shook his head and cleared his mind. He'd showered early so he could misbehave later. Ding dong, the doorbell rang through the speakers. That must be Wanda. Hood's mouth curled into a smile, and his eyes lit up. He'd come up with some new games to make things interesting. Thinking about Wanda's reaction, he hurried to the door, but when he opened it, he was surprised. It was Tony's face on the other side, with a bunch of people behind him. Steve Rogers and Rhodey were there, too. What are you doing here? Hood asked, surprised. Shouldn't these guys be at some Avengers meeting or something? What were they doing showing up at his place in the middle of the night? Hood didn't know that the energy he'd unleashed earlier had caught Tony's attention. Even though it hadn't happened at Hood's house, they decided to check up on him. Maybe Hood had seen what caused the energy surge, and there was another reason so many people came. They were curious to meet Tony's good friend. Tony, who was usually so calm, had been really worked up about it. Tony finally relaxed when he saw Hood was okay. The energy spike had been close by, and he didn't want anything happening to his friend. He introduced Hood to Steve and the others. This is Hood. Come on in, Hood said, opening the door wider. Even though he hadn't been expecting visitors, he invited them in. Nice place, Mr. Hood, Steve said, impressed by the decor. Tony's place was nice, too, but it felt a little too new money, and he had all those gadgets lying around. This place was expensive, but it also felt cozy. Thanks, Hood said. He led them into the living room and said, did you guys just come over to check out the house? That if it was just Tony, he'd probably be here to complain about something, but with all these people, they had to have another reason. Mr. Hood, we were wondering if you noticed anything unusual this morning, Steve said, leaning forward with a serious expression. The energy surge was too powerful to ignore. They hadn't found anything at the scene but trees, but they weren't buying it. This morning, Hood blinked, then he caught on and shook his head. Nope. Everything was normal. He must have made too much noise today. That's why the Avengers were here. After all, he was the only one living nearby. Looks like it's going to be even harder to find out what happened, Steve said, looking disappointed. He'd hoped to get some useful leads, but it looked like he was out of luck. Hood, break out the good stuff. I brought these guys over to taste your wine. Since there wasn't any news to be had, Tony switched to social mode. He was in a good mood. Wanda had been doing well lately, and Ross hadn't been causing too much trouble, so he was feeling lighter. All right, Hood said, smiling and shaking his head. He grabbed a bottle of Henry IV Grand Champagne Cognac from the wine rack. After opening the bottle, a strong aroma filled the room. Didn't think you'd crack open this bottle, Tony said, his eyes lighting up. He'd been wanting to try that stuff for a while, but Hood had always refused to let him. The others were sniffing the air, too. The rich aroma told them this was some high-quality stuff. I wonder who Wanda's dating. As they drank, Tony brought up the topic. The guy was a complete mystery. Wanda's being so secretive about it, someone said. Hood's face went tense. Should he tell them about him and Wanda? Chapter 59. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom, boom, boom. A faint sound from outside the window broke Hood's concentration. The chatter around him went on uninterrupted. No one else seemed to notice it. He looked up and saw a little head peeking out from the edge of the window, silhouetted against the dim glass. It waggled back and forth in his direction, then quickly disappeared. Hood couldn't help but smile. He hadn't expected Wanda to show up like this, and she looked almost ridiculously cute poking her head out like that. Hood. You okay? Tony was staring at the window, puzzled. There's nothing there. Cough, cough. Yeah, fine. Just remembered something about work. Hood coughed, trying to sound casual, and turned back to Tony. Wanda's little peekaboo made him realize that she wasn't ready for them to go public just yet, otherwise, she wouldn't be hiding outside, sneaking a hello. She must have slipped over, right? It occurred to him that they hadn't exactly defined their relationship, they were more like, very close friends, so, of course, he wouldn't just blurt it out to Tony and the others. Didn't know you ever thought about work, Tony said, grinning. He knew Hood never bothered with any of that stuff, even if he technically owned a company, he left it all to some management firm. He never even looked at Stark Industries books, now he's thinking about work. Hey, I'm swamped, okay. Hood rolled his eyes, not that he'd ever admit it. Ding! Just as Tony was about to bust his chop some more, a light flashed on the earpiece in his right ear. Boss, Secretary of State Ross just sent us intel. Major incident in Germany. King of Wakanda, from Africa, was killed in a terrorist bombing. What? Tony shot to his feet. What is it? Steve noticed Tony's sudden intensity, set down his drink, and asked, usually, only a full-blown crisis could wipe the playboy smirk off Tony's face. We got a mission. Tony grabbed his brandy and downed it in one gulp. Suit up, people. We're wheels up. Another one? I just got back. Rhodey grumbled. He'd spent the whole day cleaning up that mess at Fruit Forest Beach, now this. Even he was starting to lose his cool. Looks like you're busy again, Hood said, hands raised in mock sympathy. You're living the dream, Tony sighed, a note of genuine weariness in his voice. The King of Wakanda was assassinated in a terrorist attack. No point keeping secrets. Hood would find out soon enough anyway. Wakanda? Rhodey looked surprised. What's that? And it wasn't just this. Every time some disaster or attack happened anywhere in the world, the Avengers got dragged into it. Yeah, they were on the side of the good guys, but they were the Avengers, not the friggin' Justice League. Felt like they were babysitting the world. You need backup. Steve was already on his feet. I gotta debrief with Ross first, figure out the game plan. Tony set his glass down hard, his voice tight. He'd thought he was finally gonna get a break. But nope. Hood, listening to the conversation, knew what was coming. Looks like this was it. He'd imagined that taking care of Ross would derail the whole Civil War thing, but no, things were still moving along the same old tracks. Zemo was still gonna pull his stunt, which meant the Winter Soldier was about to make an appearance. Hood glanced back and forth between Tony and Steve. After all, Tony's dad had been killed by the Winter Soldier, but Cap was still ride or die for the guy. Even without the Sokovia Accords, these two were destined to clash. He shook his head, clearing the mental clutter. None of his business. He wasn't about to get involved in their drama. He had better things to do than worry about other people's problems. Look, Hood, gotta cut this short. Tony sounded almost apologetic. He'd barely even arrived. No worries. Go do your thing. Hood was practically itching to get rid of them. His little witch was still waiting for him outside. All right, then. See ya, Hood. Tony headed for the door, waved, and the team took off. As soon as they were gone, a pair of soft arms wrapped around him from behind. A familiar, delicate scent filled his nostrils. He knew it was Wanda. She buried her face in his back, hugging him tight, like a kitten nuzzling its owner. He could feel her hair tickling against his shirt. What's this? Is my lovely little witch already missing me? Hood put his hands over hers, a teasing smile tugging at his lips. That scent always got to him. He'd been with plenty of women before, but he'd never felt this calm. It was the feeling of someone waiting for him, warming him from the inside out. A soft, muffled sound came from behind him. He could feel the heat radiating from Wanda's cheeks. He bet all her courage had gone into that one little noise. Well, aren't you bold tonight? Maybe I should show you what endless love really means. Hood's mouth suddenly went dry. This was the first time Wanda had taken the lead. His whole body was buzzing. If Tony and the others weren't already gone, he'd drag her back into the living room and show her exactly what he meant. And what made it even better was that he'd bought new clothes after the last time. He was gonna have her try them all on. Let's go back inside. They're gone. Wanda's voice was a soft, anxious whisper. Tony had invited her to hang out with Hood today, but she'd made up some excuse, too risky to be seen in public. She wasn't ready for the world to know, and if she stayed out here, she might accidentally run into. Okay, Hood turned around and looked down at her, his face close to hers. But, little witch, didn't you say something about letting me try something new and exciting tonight? I just said you could wear the ghost spider suit. Wanda shook her head, her eyes wide. She loved their play. However, every time she tried something new she was left completely exhausted. Most of the time, every time she woke up, her whole body seemed about to fall apart, so she kept shaking her head after hearing this. Let's go. Hood bent down, scooped Wanda up in his arms, and carried her back inside. He kicked the door shut behind them. Oh, I just remembered a game. He could feel Wanda's heartbeat quicken. What game? Wanda stammered. Every time Hood suggested something new, it blew her mind. She was a little scared, but her heart was pounding. Ever heard of a rocking horse? I'll let you ride one tonight. Hood grinned, his eyes sparkling. Rocking horse? Wanda had never heard of such a thing, but whatever it was, Hood would show her. Ever since she'd met him, she'd learned so much more than just magic. Tonight, I'm playing Witch Night. And I'll be your rocking horse. It was gonna be a long night. On the way to Ross's office. You sure we shouldn't call Wanda? Steve, in the passenger seat, frowned. She could still get here in time. Let her get some rest. She's been through a lot lately. Tony shook his head. Besides, we don't even know what we're walking into yet. Even if we drag her over, she might not be able to help. And, honestly, she's still shaken up by that op in Germany. Rhodey, behind the wheel, looked exhausted. Hopefully, we can wrap this up fast. Nobody wanted to work non-stop, especially not superheroes. Hey, this one should be easier, Tony said, trying to sound upbeat. When we get back, we'll throw a party. Early morning. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, fresh air chasing away the stale remnants of the night before. Hood looked at the scene next to him and smiled. Wanda was still asleep, dead tired. Even now, her brow was slightly furrowed. So grown up, yet she loves riding that rocking horse. Hood shook his head, a tender smile on his face. Who knew she had such a playful side? Beautiful day, he murmured, gazing at the cloudless sky. He opened the window, letting the cool autumn breeze wash over him. The crisp air cleared his head. Hey, maybe I'll take the little witch out for a spin. He hadn't had maids come back to work. That meant no one to cook anything. He could order takeout. However, he knew that Wanda liked their leisurely moments. He turned back and looked at Wanda, asleep in the bed. Her lips were slightly parted, making a soft snoozing sound. Hey, little witch. Wakey, wakey. Let's go shopping. Hood leaned over and spoke softly. Wanda didn't move. She rolled over onto her back, looking at her beautiful face. Hood's heart beat a little faster. He gently blew on her face and Wanda's eyelashes fluttered. Still, she didn't open her eyes. Still asleep, huh? Looks like I gotta use morning exercises. Hood's eyes narrowed, a familiar heat building inside him. What are you doing? Wanda's eyes snapped open. She was full of energy. Hood just smiled. Witch. Over 2 hours later, Wanda trudged toward the bumblebee, exhausted. Where are we going now? She rubbed her sleepy eyes and pouted. Hood had forced her to do early morning exercises. Now she had to go out. We're gonna buy groceries. Hood slid into the driver's seat and lightly tapped the gas pedal. Don't you like my cooking? He felt a little guilty about that last breakfast. He'd planned a fancy meal, but Wanda had come downstairs too early. He hadn't had time to swap it out. Really? Wanda's eyes lit up. She still remembered that breakfast. She could never forget Hood's cooking skills. After all, this cooking skill is really great. At a big chain supermarket, Wanda, wearing a mask, held Hood's hand as they browsed the aisles. She couldn't show her face, but she felt a thrill of excitement anyway. Shopping for groceries felt like they were already married. A sense of contentment washed over her. She felt the weight of his hand in hers, a taste of happiness. It didn't take long to fill the cart, enough for a feast. As they left the supermarket, Hood started loading the groceries into the trunk. Hood, I want ice cream. Wanda tugged at his sleeve and pointed toward an ice cream parlor across the street. Such a kid. Hood reached out and gently tapped her nose. He took her hand, and they headed for the ice cream shop. Mr. Hood, a voice called out from behind them. Hood froze. That voice. Hood. Someone's calling you. Wanda looked back and saw someone jogging toward them. Hood turned around stiffly and saw Gwen, not far away. She smiled and waved. Chapter 60. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the sunshine, Gwen was rocking a white hoodie, sucking on a popsicle with this totally cute look on her face. The sunlight caught her short, golden hair, making it shimmer like gold thread. She had a little bit of melted ice cream on the corners of her mouth, which just made her look extra goofy and adorable. Slurp. Gwen took a big lick of the popsicle and looked at the two of them, surprised. Mr. Hood, is that really you? She just popped over to grab some veggies, totally not expecting to run into Hood here. For a second, she was just thrilled and hurried right over. It was a total surprise. She'd been meaning to find time to see Hood, but this felt like fate. What are you doing here? Hood looked at Gwen, his face all tight. This wasn't Queens. He definitely didn't expect to bump into Gwen. The supermarket near my place was totally cleaned out today, so I had to come to this one. Gwen stuck out her tongue and quickly licked the melting ice cream, then gave them a silly grin. It's happened before, so she wasn't too worried about it. Who's this? Wanda finally chimed in. For some reason, the second she saw Gwen, she felt this weird sense of familiarity, like she'd seen her somewhere before, but she couldn't place the face, and for some reason, she even got the feeling that there was something more than just friendly in Gwen's eyes when she talked to Hood. I mean, it was her first time falling for someone, but it was probably just a woman's intuition. This is Gwen Stacy, Hood said, trying to sound casual. She was a student in one of my lectures at the university. But inside, his heart was pounding. New York's not exactly small, but how could they all end up here together? And now, if either of them made a move, it would be like a bomb going off. After all, they both had a pretty close thing going with him. Wanda's more reserved in public, but she'd hold hands, no problem. And Gwen? She might just jump him right then and there. He made up the lie on the spot, but he was nowhere near out of the woods yet. If the two of them got to talking, who knew what could happen? Oh, yeah. I went to Mr. Hood's lectures. I was one of his students. Gwen caught on fast. She almost forgot that as far as anyone else knew, she only knew Hood as Ghost Spider, and at this point, she was just a college freshman. Plus, with other people around, she had to play it cool, like they just knew each other casually. Oh, a student, Wanda sighed in relief without even realizing it. Gwen might be young, but that was part of what made her cute, not to mention that her looks and her personality were both super appealing. If she was competition, Wanda would definitely feel the pressure, but thankfully, she was just a student Hood used to teach. Not much of a threat, probably just wanted to say hi because she saw him. Hood, I didn't know you used to give lectures. Wanda looked at Hood, giving him a questioning look, but she didn't doubt him. She'd looked up his background online before, and he had all kinds of sports trophies and business awards, so it made sense he'd get invited to speak somewhere, like Tony, for example. He gets invitations from all these top colleges. It was just a little something I did. Hood forced a smile, his voice shaking just a little. Normally, he wouldn't be nervous around women, but he realized this was totally different from some random fling. He'd actually fallen for these two, and they couldn't be more different, and no matter who he chose, he could never let the other one go. That was why he was a mess right now. Wait a minute. An idea hit Hood. If that was the case, maybe they could avoid an awkward situation, and even if the three of them were together, the chances of anything getting out would drop big time. Hey. Gwen. Hood coughed lightly into his fist. Let me introduce you to Wanda Maximoff. Wanda was taken aback. She hadn't expected Hood to just blurt out her name, but since he already had, she had to take off her mask. Scarlet Witch. Gwen pretended to be shocked, widening her eyes and quickly holding out her hand. She had her spider sense, and even with the mask, she'd recognized Wanda instantly, but since she was Gwen right now, not Ghost Spider, she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. "Hi. I'm Hood's friend," Wanda said with a smile. If she had the mask on, she could have just said girlfriend. But now that she had it off, she was the Scarlet Witch, an Avenger. She needed to keep some distance from Hood for the moment. She didn't want anyone to know about her and Hood just yet. As they shook hands, Hood finally started to breathe a little easier. The reason he'd gone ahead and told Wanda's name was because as soon as she took off the mask, she had to consider who she was, which meant she wasn't going to get all touchy-feely. So Gwen wouldn't notice anything weird between them, and with Wanda standing right there, Gwen probably wouldn't make a move. If he played it cool, he might just be able to pull this off. "Hi. I'm a huge fan. I even run one of your fan groups." Gwen always got excited around her heroes. "That's amazing, thank you so much for your support." Wanda gave Gwen a warm hug. Since Wanda was taller than Gwen, Gwen could barely breathe. "This is unreal," Gwen thought. As they hugged, she couldn't help but compare herself to Wanda. The difference between them was huge, and it made Gwen feel a little insecure. "Thank you." Gwen kept thanking Wanda after she let go. She really hadn't expected Wanda to hug her like that. "You're welcome." Wanda smiled. She had to admit, even though they'd only met a few minutes ago, she was already charmed by the girl in front of her. She was so energetic, and Wanda could feel how happy Gwen was to meet her. This girl was a real fan. "Are you guys on a mission?" Gwen blinked her big blue eyes and asked, confused. She saw Hood and Wanda together all the time. Even though she'd never seen Hood on TV, she was starting to think of Hood as a hero, too, so when she saw them together, her first thought was that they were getting ready to save the day. "Nah, Wanda and I are just out grocery shopping." Hood paused. "Wanda's coming over to my place later." That much was true. She was coming over, just not in the way she usually does. "Groceries?" A flash of disappointment crossed Gwen's face. She wanted to hang out with Hood, too, even with Wanda right next to her. She didn't want to leave. She hesitated and looked at Hood with these pleading eyes. "Mr. Hood, can I come over for dinner?" "Huh?" Hood was floored. What was happening? And who knew what would happen if he actually took her back there? He thought Gwen would say hi and leave, but he never expected her to invite herself over. If they all hung out, he was gonna get busted for sure. "Can't I?" Gwen lowered her eyes and pouted, looking all sad. "It's not that you can't, but..." To read the exciting novels, go to Falun Novel Network. Hood glanced at Wanda and tried to read her face. Last time, he got Wanda to wear that whole pinro outfit, but this was different, with both of them together. "My parents aren't home today, and I don't want to cook for myself." Gwen took a deep breath, her voice sounding a little shaky. She looked like a poor, lost child. "It's okay, Hood, let her have dinner with us." Wanda spoke up. For some reason, Gwen gave her this feeling that she'd seen her somewhere before. And the more she thought about it, the more she wanted to figure out where. "Sure, come shopping with us." Now that Wanda had said it, Hood couldn't exactly say no. He'd thought about using Wanda as an excuse to turn Gwen down, but before he could even open his mouth, Wanda had already agreed, so he had no choice but to nod. "Let's go." Wanda put her mask back on and took Gwen's arm. She led Gwen toward the supermarket. Hood shook his head and trailed after them. Seeing how close they were, Hood felt even more freaked out. He knew how girls could be when they got together. They talked about everything. God knew what kind of secrets could come out. "Gwen, what do you want to eat?" Hood took a deep breath and squeezed in between them, splitting them up. He had a plan, just keep the two of them from talking. "Anything's fine. I'm not picky. As long as it tastes good, I'm happy." Gwen, who had wanted to chat for a bit, remembered breakfast that morning. Her inner foodie woke up, and her eyes sparkled at the thought of good food. Once they got into the supermarket, the two of them let go of each other and stood beside Hood. "That steak looks good." Gwen skipped over to the freezer and started checking out the ingredients. "Wanda, what are you in the mood for?" Hood casually put his hand on Wanda's waist. He even slid it down a little and gave her a gentle squeeze. just that one touch made Wanda's face flush. She turned to Hood, totally shocked. She couldn't believe he was being so bold. I mean, Gwen was right there, and even if no one else was around, she quickly moved over to the freezer. She didn't want Gwen to see anything. "These look pretty good." "They're fresh," Hood said, pointing to some grass-fed fillet steaks. Wanda looked in the direction Hood was pointing. At that moment, Hood put his left hand over Gwen's hand and gently stroked her palm. That simple touch. "Ooh." Gwen's face turned bright red. She never expected Hood to act like that in front of Wanda, but it made her feel kind of happy. They hadn't made anything official yet, but Hood wasn't ignoring her. All her doubts from before faded away. She could understand it. With Hood's identity, it made sense to keep things quiet until they were ready to come out. She held Hood's hand tighter. If anyone was looking at them from behind, they'd see a scene that made them super jealous. His left hand was holding the hand of a cute college girl, and his right hand was sneaking touches on the girl in red every now and then. After a while, Hood pulled his hand back and grabbed the steak. "This is it. Wanda, you're too weak. You need to eat something to build you up, so you don't pass out every time." As soon as he said that, Wanda turned beet red. She knew what he was talking about. "I'm not that out of shape," Wanda protested, blushing. "That guy was such a pervert. Ms. Wanda looks perfectly healthy." Gwen said, sounding surprised. "Wanda looks healthy. Could she have some hidden injury from fighting bad guys?" "It wasn't impossible. Fungus that has been moistened by the rain certainly looks great," Hood said with a smile. "Oh." Gwen nodded, confused. She didn't get what he meant, but it sounded good, and she could tell that Hood really cared about Wanda. "You." Wanda glared at Hood and secretly pinched his waist. Gwen didn't see anything, but she felt something shift in the air. She could feel the connection between Hood and Wanda. They were more than just friends. They were close. The Avengers fight together every day, so they must be really tight, Gwen reasoned, chalking it up to the bonds between teammates. Hood and the two women left the supermarket with a full cart. "Are we really going to eat all of this?" Wanda muttered, looking at the overflowing shopping cart. "With me around, I guarantee you'll be stuffed till you're grinning from ear to ear." Hood winked at Wanda, and just that look made her blush. "That kid," suddenly, Wanda noticed a little kid wobbling around on the sidewalk. A black car was speeding down the street. The driver wasn't slowing down. Whoosh. Out of nowhere, a white blur shot past them. Someone scooped up the kid and leaped out of the way just as the car zoomed by. "Oh my God." Wanda's eyes widened as she looked at Gwen. "Hood, your student's got moves." "Yeah." Hood nodded. It was nothing for Gwen, really. "You're welcome." Gwen brought the girl over to her mom and told her to keep a closer eye on her. "She's got a strong sense of justice," Wanda said, admiring Gwen. "She'd make a good superhero." Hood smiled. "Gwen will put herself at risk to save people. Maybe that's Ghost Spider's sense of justice kicking in." "Hey, you think she has what it takes to be a superhero?" Wanda suddenly turned to Hood. "Doesn't she remind you of someone?" "Who?" Hood's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about this. Wanda gave him a calm look, her red lips parting slightly. "Ghost Spider."